Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we have Jess Sachs. Jess, how you doing?
Hey, Jason. I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to have you on the show. I have been waiting a long time to learn from you, so I'm so happy that we've got it going. So before I kind of jump into what I'm excited about, let's talk a little bit about you. So for folks who aren't familiar, could you give us a bit of a background on who you are, what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm just a free open source maintainer. I tend to go between DevTools companies. Most recently, I found a home at Ionic, and I'm really excited. I joined there in April. But before that, I worked at Cypress, the end-to-end testing company and component testing company, which is where I fell in love with Faker. I've also been heavily involved in Vue Core, Vite Core, quite a lot of projects.
Yeah, you are kind of you have a very impressive and packed with names I've heard of resume in open source. So what we're talking about mostly today is going to be Faker.js and component-driven dev. So before we talk about component-driven dev, let's talk a little bit about Faker. So my understanding of Faker is pretty limited. So what I understand it to be is it is a way to create fake but plausible data for testing projects. Is that correct?
Yeah, for any project. People use it for seeding data. People use it, DevRels use it for demos to create really nice looking demos. It's used, and it's also not language specific. It's not just JavaScript, right?
Oh, cool. Okay.
Faker.js. Yeah. There's a lot of different bindings for it. It's just an idea, being
That
able to create realistic mock data for reasons.
and I feel like that's such a useful it's a thing that I always want and that I'm always kind of unhappy with my own fake data because you copy paste it a million times and you're just like editing a number. It's like blog post 1, blog post 2, and I'm like, okay, but now all of my styling is only optimized for three word titles, and I
Yeah.
am never going to write a 3-word title. It's always going to be the maximum number of characters. So,
Yeah, exactly. And it's very helpful to have things like, one of the most common ones I use for testing is the Lorem module. And then the other thing I use is there's some domain specific APIs, like my other favorite is the BS module. I think we renamed it, but it stands for bullshit. And you can get little buzzwords, and you can get little phrases that you might say that at work that nobody actually likes saying. So you can get little slang, little company like taglines and stuff. And I like to use that one in product names, and it's all localized as well. So we
oh,
support.
cool.
Oh my goodness, I had to count the number of languages. That's the other thing that is related to that issue is of just using 3 words, blog post 1, 2,
Right.
3, is then the moment you add like a right to left language or
Mm-hmm.
a language that requires like your fonts to be fixed width fonts, you know what I mean, for per
Oh,
character,
right, right,
like
right.
things just look different. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think more than 50
Dang.
languages, as in the majority of our PRs actually,
That's so
and the
cool.
bundle size.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough, right? Well, so that is very cool, and I mean, I'm seeing a couple folks already mentioning use cases in the chat, but I am always very interested in just sort of like how did you come to this project? Because I saw you post somewhere that like Faker.js was created by a group of strangers, and it just kind of sounds like how did this come to be?
Yeah. So the origin story of why Faker needed a group of open source stewards is a longer one than how everybody came together. So how everybody came together was, I think, friends of friends, right? So like
Mm,
I wasn't heavily involved in Vite core,
hmm.
but somebody was, and they knew of me, and I was fairly active on Twitter, and they reached out. I was in the Boston.js Slack. I remember that's when I heard about Faker needing help. And we can talk about the backstory at some point if you want. But yeah, we had somebody, he was a CEO at, I think, Greycore, Damien. Damien had the most recent fork of Faker, and we all collectively both handled the fallout of needing a new organization, like needing a new maintainer. The repo was deleted, right? So we had to have a fork of it. So we took that fork, made an org on GitHub, and then collectively made a community control project.
Yeah.
And everybody worked great together. Most of the team is actually from Germany by happenstance.
Okay.
Yeah, and I get to speak German, and like I used to live there, and I never get to speak it, so I'm always really excited on team meetings.
That's great. My German is limited to like, I can say like ham and cheese, I'm pretty sure. That's the only thing that I'm a polyglot in. I can speak every language as long as all I have to say is ham and cheese.
I was like, wow, you're a polyglot, ham and cheese polyglot. And I was like, also respect. But yeah, the Faker story I'm very proud of, because we swarmed. In less than 2 weeks, we had taken a repository that had no documentation. Like, it had no official docs. It had no type support. And it hadn't been really touched since 2015. And this is 2020, right, when this is happening. Sorry, 2022 when this is happening. Wow. Time.
Yeah.
All right. So it hadn't been touched in 7 years, really. And then it was just deleted, and we all used it. Like, strings don't change, right? You don't really need to update a library that much, but documentation was nice. Would have been a nice thing. There was a third party person who was maintaining docs that were mostly correct for the library. Like, mostly, like, yeah. It was pretty bad. You would have to like memorize the differences between the unofficial docs and the actual implementation when you use this library. It's terrible. So we swarmed, and the whole thing was rewritten in TypeScript within 2 weeks. And official type support, official documentation, this code gen documentation. Like, it was treated with love and care, as it should have been. So.
Well, I mean, I think that's such a cool example of what we want open source to be, right? Is it's a thing that is useful to everybody, and when it needs maintenance, people step up and do that. They make it accessible to the community again. And so that's great, especially when, we see kind of other instances where it goes the opposite direction, where things that really do need maintenance, like nobody will prioritize the time to do it. And you end up with these great projects that just sort of fall into disrepair. Well, let's talk about, I know that we're going to go a little bit shorter than usual today, so I want to make sure that I keep us moving. So let's talk a little bit about component-driven dev, and then I'm going to drive us right into code. So when you say component-driven development, what my brain did was like, well, isn't that what I already do, where I like make a component and then I stick it into other parts of my code? So what, like, when you say that, what do you mean by it, and sort of what's the strategy that you're going for?
So have you heard of test-driven development, right? That's a rhetorical question. Yeah. So it's kind of like, if you think of your components as functions, right? They have a contract, they have props, and in some frameworks they have different ideas like events and view. But really it's just like, they're like callbacks to a function. So if you think of components as functions, you're trying to test that function, and it happens that many components are headed, and many components want to be rendered with CSS and styles, right? And nobody's writing Times New Roman. And component-driven development is the idea of isolating each component into its smallest pieces and putting it on a web page, putting it in resizable containers, making sure it smushes correctly. Now that we have, container queries, that becomes a much more satisfying experience. Smush is the technical term.
Smush is the technical. I really wanted to. Yes, I love it.
But yeah, it scales correctly. So component-driven development is the idea of starting at these leaf nodes of our design and then bubbling up all the way to the top of our component hierarchy. So you can test everything from presentational layers through container components, things that depend on GraphQL. Like you can component drive most of your application, and then at the end, which is probably what you think you do at the beginning, you're like, I think I do this already. At the end, you stitch it back into an application in its entirety. But you've isolated out each component already so that it's easily testable. That's the difference, is that you want to be able to mount the component in each contract you expect to use it versus just being like, I'm sure I'm going to want to have a small, medium, and large, but I don't have an app string that needs it right now.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a pitfall that we can land in, where we end up with like, okay, I have a component, and so instead of building the app, I'm going to take a week or two to build out 9 million permutations of this that we don't actually have a use case for. But I love this idea of thinking about because what you're basically saying is like treat each component like a tiny little website and make sure that in isolation it works. And that's,
and in German, make sure it works.
Yeah, right. But this is such a good.
That's the Faker part.
I feel like when you're saying to do this, I originally wasn't following what you meant, and as soon as you said it, that like common sense part of my brain was like, oh, of course. Like this is what we always want. Is when you get told to debug, it's like, well, make the problem as small as you can. Like, how can you like turn off as many things as possible so you're just testing the one piece of logic and make sure that works, and then add more and then add more, and you'll finally see where the bug is. And why not do that with UI? Like this is a very logical way to solve that problem.
Yeah, like if you take a virtualized list, for example, that's streaming data in, that's a lot to think about, right? Like you're building a dashboard or something like that needs to infinitely scroll, or like, I don't know, Twitter or X timeline. You have to think a lot about asynchronicity, and you're not thinking about this, like the CSS contract required to make your virtualized list work itself, not thinking about the network layer, right? So you end up thinking about the problems in isolation versus in the context of your app, and being able to debug at each level versus, the whole app at once.
Absolutely.
Where's the bug?
Well, amazing. All right. So in the interest of time, I'm going to push us over into pair programming mode here. So let me make sure I've got the right things up on screen, and then I'm going to switch us over. All right. So first and foremost, this episode, like every episode, is being live captioned. We've got Ashley here from White Coat Captioning. Thank you, Ashley. And that's made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify and Vet2 Code. Thank you very much to both of them for making this work. We are talking to, oh no, there it is. We are talking to Jess today. Make sure you go give a follow on Twitter and all those good things. And we are talking about Faker as well. And then for component-driven dev, I wasn't sure if there was a specific link you wanted me to throw around for everybody, or maybe a blog post or something.
Yeah, so there's actually a website championed by the team at Storybook. It's component, I'm going to mess it up. It's going to be like .org, I think. The TLD is like one of the weird ones that I don't usually use. Component-driven.org. Let me find it.
This one?
Did you find it before I did?
Component-driven user interfaces.
Yes, it did. Yeah, sorry, Arc was being weird. Arc was auto-correcting for me. Anyway,
Very
yes,
helpful.
component-driven user interfaces. So there is a open standard that they championed called the CSF, the component story format. But it's basically the idea that you should be able to render something in isolation onto a context, whether that's inside of an iframe, whether that's, I don't know, in a Vite project that you and I might put together, like npx create Vite, and just do one component at a time. Wherever that container is, you can component drive your development, so long as you're building the individual pieces one at a time. And as a side effect, almost, it becomes very easy to test once you've done that.
Okay.
That's kind of, I call it accidentally testable is component-driven development makes it really easy to test everything.
I think that's a good thing to point out is like as you're choosing like how you're going to build things, that accidentally testable component is such a big deal because it's so easy to talk yourself out of writing tests if it's not kind of part of the default, like out of the table stakes. And then the other problem that I've noticed is like this happened to me was the opposite problem where we had written no tests at when I was at IBM, and then we decided that we wanted some testability so that we could be more confident about shipping. And then I got into like super nerd focus mode and I couldn't stop writing tests. And I was like, I'm getting 100% code coverage. And because the code was so messy, I ended up like, I wasted so much time trying to test these weird edge cases that were hard to test because of the way the code was architected, right? So I love this idea of make it testable through the architecture, not like go figure out how to do whatever loop-de-loop you did in the code as a test.
Yeah, you can almost, sometimes I even just write the documentation. So I pretend that I'm going to write internal documentation for how to use this component. And sometimes I component drive in like VitePress, for example. Like it doesn't matter where you do it. You can do it in docs and just write the code snippets for how you would explain to a coworker how to use your button, or how do I hook up A to B? How do I hook up A component to B component? Should the state be passed in? Like have these conversations with yourself as you're doing component-driven development. But just think of the Slack message that you'll write when you explain to your coworker how to use your code. And then that should be how you mount your component. And from there, testing it, depending on your library, is actually not hard. It's just the mounting that's hard.
Sure. Okay. Well, excellent. I'm ready. I want to try this. So if I want to get started, what should my first step be?
So if you want to get started doing component-driven development, you're going to go into your project, whatever project you may have. Like if I'm speaking to the audience, right? So to whatever project you may have, and you want to get an environment up. That environment could be a Cypress component testing thing, a Playwright component testing thing, or for our purposes, we should probably just create a Vite sandbox. So let's go and create like a Vite sandbox in whatever language you prefer, or front-end framework you prefer. I will tell you that I'm very, very bad at React, given all my Vue time.
Okay, so I will do it in Vue, and so we will let's do npm create Vite, and we're going to call this project component, if I can spell it, driven dev Faker.
Big call out, by the way, to storybooks. If you have a storybook project, you're probably already doing component-driven development. Actually.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking about as you were saying that is that, you know, it's render it in isolation and make sure that you can see all the variations, and I was like, oh yeah, that is what Storybook does, but I didn't want to derail us.
That is the correct way. Yeah, or not the correct way. That is a environment you can play in.
All right, let me get this project open.
There,
and one of these, here it is.
Your window bigger. Okay.
All right, so I have a brand new project. It is a Vite Vue TypeScript.
Okay, so how are we going to do this so that it feels right? We're going to overload your app, and we're going to pretend like it's the Storybook container or the docs site. So we're gonna basically treat your app like a docs site.
Okay.
So you can maybe make an H1 tag and be like Jason Langsdorff's component-driven development exploration.
We're going to see how many times I misspell component today. Okay. So there's our H1.
Cool. And let's think of some components that we want to build. So we can go one of two ways. We can go presentational, or we can go network, like app style stuff. What do you want to do? Presentational is going to be easier.
Do you think we
and
have
give us a clearer
time to do
contract.
both? Like, could we do one?
Why not both?
Yeah, let's start with something presentational so that we can see, like, this is kind of how it works most easily, and then we'll put something together like that would pull from an API, and then we can use Faker for that. Or I guess we can probably use Faker for both, huh?
Yeah. We'll use Faker for both. Okay, so what components are we building?
Maybe like a card component. That seems like the standard of everything that you would need. And then, yeah, I think that could be good. And then maybe like
Let's go from there.
Yeah.
And then we'll fetch in some products from a list. All right, so we'll do like 3 components. We'll do a card, which will be like our lowest level.
Okay.
Let's make it. Can I speak in high level, or do you want me to like go line by line?
Help me with the first one, because I haven't written view in a bit, and then you can go high level.
Yeah. So let's make a template tag, and then we're gonna do div hello world.
And do we want to? Is that
Let's
like
get this project up?
Like a class?
A div and then hello world inside of it. It's just HTML.
I gotcha.
Nice. And then below you actually don't need to do anything else. So let's start up Vite.
Okay.
Did you use npm?
I did.
npm run dev, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Boom. I love it. So we have our app component rendering. That's going to be our top level at any given moment. But we're not going to start there when we're building. We're going to start on our leaf nodes. We're going to start on our card. So let's render the card inside of app.view. We're going to do that by importing inside of the script. We're going to say import card from ./card.view.
Okay.
Yep, perfect. And then just render it. Love it. And we should get a hello world. Very nice. We can, I'm so used to Tailwind, I was like, we can start just styling it. So we have our hello world component here. And let's go ahead and make the architecture for the card component. Also, let's reset all the app stuff. We'll get to styles in a second. It's actually kind of an interesting.
Okay.
When we get to the networking stuff, it'll get interesting. So we'll keep the app page styles. This is a very important point to make, actually. In component-driven development, if your sandbox, be that Storybook or Cypress or Playwright or whatever, your doc site, if that main.css that you expect to be imported is not there, you will build things completely incorrectly. You will build things with like the wrong body height or something like that. And once you go to integrate your components that you built in the sandbox into prod, into your app, you'll be like, oh goodness, it's wrong. So very important to make sure that your main CSS is always imported when you're building your components. So let's go into card view and let's pull up the Faker docs. So we're gonna play to Faker strengths. It's really good with products.
Okay.
So if we go to the API and type in products, airlines, we get a lot. You could just scroll through the whole.
Let's do a quick roll here. Animals, colors, commerce, companies, databases, finance. Oh, this is dope. Just a huge amount of plausible fake data, address data, which is really, really useful to have.
Localized address data.
Oh, he's so good.
And the IPv6 stuff, like finance information, it's everything from silliness to domain specific stuff. You should be able to get anything you need from Faker, or a combination of Faker things. It also exports like kind of a mustache templating thing. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
need a mix between like your custom stuff, so Cypress does this. When Cypress was component driven developed, the rewrite that I did for Cypress, we have a lot of file paths and stuff like that, and you can mix all of the Windows style file paths that you might have with the Unix ones when you're testing out your list of files, for example. It's really versatile. Okay, so we have a product which gives us a string back. We have a product adjective. So let's come up with a contract for our card that seems e-commercey. Let's build
Okay.
a
I assume I
kind
need
of a
to
card that
install Faker first, right?
you do.
Okay.
Yes.
And it is just called Faker, or is it Faker.js?
It is. It has a namespace. It
Oh,
is
okay.
at Faker-js/Faker.
Okay.
That's so that we can extend it later on. Generally, it should be a dev dependency. It's about 10 megs
Oh,
because of all the
geez.
strings and localizations.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me
Yeah. Don't
uninstall,
get that spot.
and then we will do it again as a dev dependency.
Yep.
Okay.
Strings. They don't compress.
That's fair. Okay. So now we have, I need to write a script, and what's the view? It's like an attribute, right? To say that,
Script setup.
oh, this one.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then we're going to do view 3 style, like what you would do if you're writing TypeScript, but it works in JavaScript. Define props as a function. So define props is, there you go, capital, yeah. And it takes an object. If you're using TypeScript, it would take an interface or a type, but we're not. So let's just say product name is a string, and you're going to use the runtime string because we're in JavaScript.TypeScript.
The
So you're not going
run,
to use like the primitive, excuse me.
but like that? Wait,
No, just the data type string. string, capital S.
capital S. Okay. All right. I'm getting
If you
there.
have, we
Slowly.
don't have TypeScript in the project. Yeah.
I thought
So that's now.
I added TypeScript. We should be okay.
Oh. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Then let's do this in TypeScript. So like so lang ts is what you need on the script tag now. So lang is ts. And,
Okay.
perfect. And so the syntax now is going to be define props takes a generic. So our triangle brackets instead of the parentheses, define props is going to
Got it.
take a generic. Perfect. And take off that. Let's and then invoke it, please. There you go. Cool. So the H2 tag, maybe let's use the product name instead.
Okay. And to do that in Vue, is it a curly
Double.
brace like this? Double?
It's just double curly brace. It's the only difference really between
Okay.
React and Vue.
The only difference. It's basically the same thing.
Basically the same thing. I don't know why people no. It's all HTML really. So yeah, just save it and let's go back to our app. And we shouldn't get anything because we don't have any default value set for product name.
It's gone.
And let's use Faker. Yeah, let's use Faker and make one.
Okay.
So at this point, our app is still, we're considering our app our documentation site or sandbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we might decide to say like an H2 tag in the app should be card, and then we'll render a bunch of different cards with a bunch of different product names, maybe in German and such. So let's go to app. And card now is yelling at us because we're in TypeScript. And actually, this is a nice Vue thing, by the way. Valar doesn't really care if you're in. Oh no, you have line 1 set to TS. Anyway, let's import Faker for the first time. Yep. Yep. Cool. Let me find, I think it needs to be a curly brace import. We removed the default export. Yeah, if you want to hover over it and tell it, and the types will work. Perfect. So we should be able to call Faker. So inside of the card, you can just use a const there. Yeah. So let's do const product name is equal to Faker.
Faker dot
And auto
commerce
perfect
product. Okay.
Invoke, yeah. And then in Vue, that's available globally with script setup. It's just a nice, convenient way. And in Vue, when you want to make something, yep, you got it.
This one, got it.
Yeah, that's the main difference. And then quotes.
Quotes.
So yeah.
Right, because when you preface with one of these, then this becomes like the JavaScript bit.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that becomes the JavaScript bit, and that's so that we have good support for native HTML. So like a lot of pass-throughs in Vue work, like you have to redefine them in React, like aria label, you have to redefine the props.
Right.
And then Vue passes through. That's one of the reasons. But yeah, so we have a product name now, and we have a mouse. We got a mouse. Let's say that our mouse maybe should cost something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's make a fake price and add the price prop.
Okay, and we do you do this as a number? And then we would want that to be like a, or we could even just do. Do we want to do like
label it if you want?
Are we doing like a number format thing, or what's the right way to handle this when we get into?
So it's going to give you realistic looking data. So we're not going to format it. We're not going to do anything fun. It's just going to give you a realistic looking price.
Okay.
So let's save that little buddy. Yep.
Is it under commerce?
Yep.
No. Finance.
No, commerce was. Commerce was right. Commerce had price.
Oh, price. There it was. Yeah, I just missed it.
They all use each other internally, by the way. So I'm pretty sure price is going to give you like a. Let's see what we get off of here.
So it gave me 668.
668. Perfect. So let's see, we can add currency if you wanted to add the localization there. So we could go back into that finance method again. So, and it takes arguments, by the way, if you want to make things like min and max. So if you have a overprice, if there's things that are like unreasonably.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, decimals. There we go. Symbol. I think this is a Boolean. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think.
What does it want? It wants options, symbol, string.
String. Yeah. So.
Is that just like I can tell it what symbol to use?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can get the current locale out and then use that symbol. So like you could have gone to the commerce API. So if we were going to do this for localization, you will notice that as you save, it's changing the price and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes a problem in testing when you want the same results and you want like snapshot testing over time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an API called seed. If you do faker.seed at the top, you're going to say 1 maybe, and that makes it deterministic instead of random. So now that integer there,
every time I load, it doesn't change. But if I comment this out, it changes every time.
Or if you picked a different number. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right. So you can. The seed sort of tells it where to go and then keeps it right there. That's great. And if I remember correctly, that. And so this also does. So when you seed, like every time we call it, it's kind of starting from the same seed number, but not giving us the same one for every call. So right. So like every time we call it, it'll give us the next one in the sequence, but it'll always be the same sequence as long as the seed number matches.
Correct. Yeah. So if you were to render, and also TypeScript's telling us we did it wrong because it isn't a number anymore. We made it a string.
We did, didn't we?
We did. Yeah. So let's render another card just to show that off, maybe.
Okay. Whoops. Not like that. We won't. Okay. So we got another one. Should I just double it for now?
You don't need to. Don't worry. Yeah. Yeah. If you wanna map over it, yeah, just make const products, or whatever you'd like to do.
I mean, yeah. Let's do it the right way.
I tend to work with lists. Yeah, because then what becomes really nice is if you make a shit ton of products, you can slice them and grab like 10, and then you could easily go back and grab 10,000 if you're trying to test how laggy it is.
Got it.
That's kind of the power, I think, of Faker and how much data it can produce. That's you can quickly component drive if your virtualized list will handle zero, or will handle nothing, a few, many, or a lot of data stylistically. So const products, let's what's your favorite way of making a lot of something?
I feel like I would probably make like an array and then just do give it a whatever length and then just map over it and do whatever I want, right?
Yeah.
Now, whether or not I can do that from memory is a much different question.
I'm Googling it.
Array length. So let's give it array length of 100 and then map, and then it should be item. And we should be able to return the product name. And I'm just going to pull this part in. And then a price. I think I did this wrong, didn't I?
Oh, I found it here. It's with fill. New array.
New array.
New array. Dot fill. And then map. I think fill takes in. I'm trying to pull up the
Fill
box.
takes a value of any.
4 ways to populate an array in JavaScript. Medium articles are powering the world until ChatGPT does.
Will this work?
Yeah.
Okay, so
fill with null and then map it.
Fill with null.
Beautiful.
Okay, am I doing this right? V4 product in products.
A little bit different from Svelte and Solid. The V4 is just a directive, so it's like an attribute on card.
Oh, easier.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you only need the card. You don't have a pseudo existing element. You do it in the pseudo existing attribute.
Got it. And we'll do equals, and then.
Yep. It is.
Oh wait, and then it's going to be product product name and product dot price.
You can also destructure if you so choose. But yeah, so there we are. There's all of our products.
Beautiful.
We can see that products. Yeah, we can see that products currently is being laid out. So you can see a bunch of things now that we're component driving. Let's add a border because it's very easy now to see layout. This is the second helpful part of component driven development. So border 1 pixel, solid red. So you can see now who owns the container. So when you're making a component, you have a style design choice. Part of the API of a component is its style.
Mm-hmm.
Is the parent going to own the margin? Is the child? Is the parent going to own the padding? Is the child? So you can say the parent app is now the container, and it's responsible for laying out or being able to lay out all of the cards in a grid view. The card doesn't really care about what's going on around it, let's say.
Sure.
So let's say now we're going to style the app realistically, and give it a grid, probably.
Okay, so we'll do a div class products, and oops, get that out there. And then in here we can do products, and we'll make, oh my goodness. I did this thing where I like remapped my keys, and I'm not sure if I'm happy about it yet. Okay, so then we'll set this up as a display grid, and we'll say grid template columns and
3FR or something.
yeah.
Or fixed. Yeah, let's
Wait, yeah. What?
let's do
Wait.
something fixed.
What would it be like?
180.
What's the one where it does auto? It's
Min max 180 pixels to 1FR. I think. Or am I thinking the autofill? Oh, I'm thinking autofill, aren't I?
it would. Yeah. What's the auto? No, I'm doing this wrong. You know what?
I always
I'm gonna
look it up.
I'm gonna do it like this instead, because I know this one off the top of my head, and I know we're short on time. And then that works, and then we'll say a
Good wrap is true.
flex wrap is wrap, and there we go.
Beautiful.
And you know what?
So now
good enough.
basically, but we can see where the responsibilities lie, right? Everything in the red box is our problem right now as we're building our card. Everything outside the red box ideally should work. We do want to say that the card should take up the available, either should be fixed or it should take up the available width, right? So I think we want to make this product, yeah, you're doing it. And we're going to say width is full, give it an intrinsic width. 100%. Let's see. Why am I bad at styling? CSS Live. Let's see.
So like
There's two ways we could do it.
yeah, I would probably hit this with like a a width of like min, and we'll give it 200 pixels, and that way it'll kind of force this way, but then if we make it teeny tiny, I guess it still won't get that.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever, it's close enough.
But that's the parent's problem. That's not our problem. It's the parent's problem. Okay, so we have our towels, we have our chicken, balls and hats. Yeah, you're making it pretty. But this is good though, that we have our products and we have our app, and the gist of it is that, let's see, what else do we want to do? Give me a hot second. I want to break the styles. That's what we're going to do. We're going to use Faker to break the styles. We're going to use a long word.
Okay.
So instead of using a product name, we might fill it in with products, which is nice for demos sometimes. But sometimes you want long products. So you could just add multiple words, or you could switch out of the domain context and really go for just testing the styles instead of demoing it, and do lorem. So I use the lorem module the most when I'm trying to break styles. Pick a, line slug text words. Words of like 5 is probably good. You don't, for a product name? Yeah. Words, you can do min-max, again, as an object.
Oh, cool. Okay. So
yeah.
Min of, we'll say 4, and max of, we'll say 7, and that should break it for sure.
Yeah, that'll make the overflow like just terrible.
Yeah.
So this is when you call your designer and you're like, hey, I put more words in.
Hey, so I did a thing, and you probably want to look at this.
But this is the aha moment of component-driven development. Like, I know we're doing a very cheap and dirty version of this, but you can imagine putting this entire workflow into a test situation, a headed test. So using Cypress component testing or Playwright or Storybook, you take this workflow, you take Faker, and you start developing your components there. and you don't worry about the parent generally, but you call your designer more frequently, basically. You call your designer and you're like, do we want the price at the bottom or the top? Do we want it, how do we want to handle overflow? Do you want dashes between your word breaks? Yeah, you start asking yourself a lot more styling questions at this point when you're talking to your designer. Like that looks not great, but you can get some confidence as you're building, right?
Right.
That your stuff is going to look okay.
And you can just start kind of like you sit with your designer and you're like, well, do you want it like that, or do you want to, what do you want this to do? And that, I think that's
Yeah.
such a nice. I had a really good call once with Dan Mall, and he talked about this, that when you build like this, you are shortening the feedback loop, where you are increasing the opportunities to just high bandwidth sit with the designer and you solve a problem, instead of this sort of waterfall process of like, well, designers throw a design over the wall and then the devs have to deal with it, and then the designers will review it maybe later, or it just ships to production.
Yeah, exactly. And you shorten the feedback cycle and you find the bugs before you even get to the point of saying, like, are we using Axios, or making decisions about network layer stuff. So you end up finding maybe that you're not building the right thing even, or the right design. You kind of approach it differently. It's more product focused and technology focused, I think. Let's see. A lot of time I spend developing components is actually handling overflow and handling the CSS cases that maybe weren't important. So that's very helpful. Okay, cool. So let's see. We have no test library to show how easy it would be to test and pass in these props. But the TLDR is that we would have done this perhaps in something like a test runner that's headed. And so now the step between testing our card and developing our card would be basically non-existent. It would be two method calls. It would be dot contains product name that I just used and should be visible, and like dot contains price should be visible, and that would be our test. Like we had the feedback, the difference between the when you write the code and how easy it is to test should be, you shouldn't even feel it. If we added an event, let's say, if we wanted the parent to be notified whenever the card was clicked on, we could do that really quickly. That's like kind of a method callback. So in Vue, you use the at notation right after class. You use at click and say $ emit product selected. That's going to be like, that should be computer friendly. So either camel case it or kabat it, but it should be computer friendly. So let's save that. There's a TypeScript definition for define emits. We're not going to do it.
Okay.
But that would give us type safety, and now we can bind to bind to the card and say at click equals.
Oh wait, am I doing something? Wait, where
No, you're
I need a bind?
no.
Oh, okay.
Just at click.
At click.
Yeah. So sorry. At product selected. I'm totally blanking. Live coding sometimes is. Yeah. There you go. Thank you, Valar. And then we can do something. So if we were testing, we would be, making sure that a spy was invoked with a certain argument. Right. So if we were testing, that's kind of what you would do. If we were in a sandbox, you might say like emit to this whatever storybook API lets it show up in the console. For us, because we're building a theoretical docs site for our card component, we might tell the developer like card was clicked.
Like that?
Yeah, I don't know if console will work. I think it used to not. and I do not remember.
Hooray!
Perfect. Yeah, I got out of the habit of using window methods inside of templates. But yeah, so console log was clicked, and so when you're in like a doc site, if you're using component-driven development in a doc site, you would tell the developer something. A really good example of this, because we're short on time, is if you go to view use .org, I believe, yeah, and go to functions are cool, but the search, go to the search and type in infinite. So Command
Search, here we
K.
go. Infinite.
It might be called virtualized, but I'm looking for the infinitely scrollable list.
Oh yeah, it was
Use
in
virtual list.
use infinite scroll.
Yeah, perfect. I want the virtualized one. There should be a because that one has reactivity. Use virtualized. Yeah, so this is the one. This is what I built. And if you can filter the list by size or whatever, and then you can below look at the contract, kind of like the usage. So when I'm doing, when I built that, I did it in the doc site. There's a playground component that exists that exercises the usage of the virtualized list. It exercises the composable, or like if you were in React, it would exercise the hook,
Okay.
which is a little bit, it depends on your framework how you would build a playground component. But that's how this would end up looking if we were doing it like for realsies.
Right.
So we went ahead and we did a very quick and dirty demo just to demonstrate like the fun, calling back to what I said at the beginning of this live stream, the functional nature of a component. But practically, what you end up building is something like this. So that's
Very, yeah.
that's the power for me. Yeah,
And this is,
with a sandbox.
I was just going to say, this is super cool stuff, because like I can see how quickly this, you know, it doesn't feel that different from how I build components anyways. So with a couple small adjustments to the way that I'm building, we have a much more robust component coming out of the build process. And we have this very short path to testing and also documentation. Like with all of this that happened, this doesn't look like it took much more than like, okay, this is what I built to show my component, so I'm going to put that on the page. And you know, there's, is this even like custom written, or is this being pulled out of your implementation and just kind of just like generated for you?
Yes to both. So the view, if anybody's ever looking for a great way to build a library, the view use tooling is phenomenal. So yeah, yes to both. So if you piped over to the source and looked at all of the scripts that the team puts together in the script section, I think, yeah, top level scripts.
Scripts.
Yeah. The way that they ended up doing all the type extra, like any library authors watching this is my reference for when I'm building, if I need to do something interesting to pull out typedefs from like JS.doc or whatever.
Nice.
So yeah, I love the tooling that they put together. That team is amazing. So what we didn't talk about was, like, we just talked about presentational components for a while. We didn't talk about two things. We didn't talk about language switching, which you can do very, very quickly on the right side if we pull up our sandbox again. We can just flex it. There we go. So let's go, maybe change that back to the product, because lorem is not localized. It doesn't need to be. And then we can switch the locale of Faker.
Okay, I'm just gonna drop
Product
this
name.
out, and then
I think it's on commerce, not product.
oh, right. Sorry.
So Faker dot. So I think we nest the locales. So you're gonna import it. Let's look at the docs really quickly. It's like at the top level of the Faker docs.
Okay, Faker top level.
Should talk about locale very, very quickly.
Options.locale.
Yep. So we're going to say Faker.locale, I believe, will let us do it. We might need to instantiate a new instance of Faker. It's deprecated.
Let's see.
We usually do
Oh, so
this once.
you have to pull in the different version.
Yeah, yeah. We do this because of package splitting. We changed this very recently. Yeah. So you can pull it in from German if you so choose. And then
Okay.
you could instantiate it with different locales.
So okay, so just to
So just
show this, we'll do this, and then I'll get rid of this bit, and then we should see.
if you change the import, yes. So you didn't change the path of the import to be DE.
Oh, locales.
Locale. Yeah.
DE.
I think locale. There you go. No?
Does it need
Did
to
I
be
pick the one that
Faker
we haven't?
DE? No, that's not it.
No, you had it right. I think maybe I picked one that doesn't have localization because like addresses and stuff do, but there are some modules that we don't localize
Oh, I gotcha.
because of the
Okay.
size constraint, because we have 50 of them, and maybe German is one of them.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll ignore that flex. That was a fail. This is live coding.
Pull it back here. Nope.
So
Here. Okay.
it's okay. It's likely that just products aren't localized for German in
Got it.
particular. But we have but the addresses are definitely localized. Okay, so that was the one thing was localization, and we didn't touch on container components. We're a little over. Do you have a little more time?
I mean, I have all the time in the world, or 29 minutes to be exact.
Do you want to?
I mean, it's up to you. If you want to demo it, we got time. If you have to be done, we can also be done.
I can talk about it.
Yeah.
And maybe the audience will understand. So we did a bunch of stuff that was presentational in nature, right? We didn't touch any network layer, right? So usually what would happen is you would have a card list. Maybe that card list would be eventually be a product card list, and that product card list on mount or whenever your application deemed necessary would eventually make an API call. Or set up some sort of connection, data store, fetch a thingy, fetch a lot of those products that we're currently passing in from app, rendering from app. So what component-driven development forces you to think about is if you're going to where you're going to put state, and it helps you figure out hey, the product list is gonna be responsible for the network layer and state. So that's the first thing you're thinking of. You're and that might be obvious to some people. It's a thing you learn fairly early on. But when you're testing the product list, you are going to mock the network. And back in the day, we used things like Axios mocking in Jest. Nowadays, what's kind of in fashion, and VTest also has a browser mode, by the way. It's very experimental. It technically renders Three.js, but you can't do real clicks and stuff with it.
Okay.
Or full page navigation. So it has a lot of limitations at this point, which is why I'm still using Cypress, which I will move off of as soon as VTest has a browser, has a stable browser mode. But the thing that's in fashion right now is mock service worker, and it's fairly portable to every single environment. It's a little heavyweight. MSW, mock service worker. And it gives you express level control by intercepting your requests with service workers.
Oh, cool.
It's pretty cool.
That's
and
cool.
that's where you'd put your Faker stuff. Your first names, your last names, that would all contain Faker.person or Faker.name, right? That's where you would put your fake data.
Yeah.
I will
Okay.
say, and it also has a GraphQL API. I will say, while mock service worker is popular, I really prefer the Cypress intercept API, and I'm hunting for somebody who's going to. Somebody posted on Twitter asking if mock service worker, if anybody had any gripes about it. Intercept is and this is me patting myself on the back so hard that my shoulder hurts. This was the first thing I designed when I was at Cypress. It's just much more intuitive. You're trying to very simply you're trying to take a URL and return some JSON. You don't have to, and you can also write the express style syntax. So you can then eject out into the lower level stuff if you're doing stuff with WebSockets or GraphQL. But generally, you want to be able to respond with a bad status code. You want to be able to wait a little bit if you're trying to test out in component-driven development. If you're trying to test out that loading state for 2 seconds, intercept with a timeout or with a response of 2 seconds. I really like this API, and it's one of the reasons I still develop in Cypress, even though Cypress is very slow and heavy. When I need, it has what I need very quickly. I don't have to write a lot of boilerplate. So,
Got it.
Anyway, those are the 2 ways that you would start to mock the network for your container components that start to care about the domain model.
Nice. Okay. Well, I know you got to get going. So why don't I do another? I'm going to toss everyone to the Faker site again. And I will also pass one more link to this component-driven user interfaces site. Is there anything else that you want to make sure we reference as a resource for somebody who wants to do more?
So for people who want to do more with Faker, we really want contributors. We have some great contributors, but we really love open source, right? There's a reason that the team got together, the community got together. So please come to chat.faker.js.dev and join us in the Discord. We have a lot of really great outside contributions. Most recently, we got the random color module that just gives you a random color, which is very convenient if you're in Code Sandbox and you want to demo some CSS. And I'd also like to give a shout out, if possible, to Indeed, who sponsored the project twice for a total of $20,000, and that was
Dang.
that's what funded the project. I think I took $20 total. So a huge shout out to Indeed and the open source contributions, and then also a huge shout out to Airbnb, who's been giving us $50 a month, and it's been really helpful. We have an open collective, opencollective.com/Faker.js.
Nice.
If you want to see all the companies that have sponsored us. Really helpful. So that's all I got. Team is extremely responsive. If you ask in Faker.js in the Discord, you will get responses, and we'll be excited to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time and teaching us today. You can all go follow Jess on Twitter and go check out Faker. Go build some of this stuff and let us know. Let us know how it goes, how you feel about it, and whether or not you feel like it's making your applications better. This episode, like every episode, has been live captioned. We've had Ashley here from Whitecoat Captioning today. Thank you so much. And that's made possible through the support of our sponsors. We've got Netlify and Vetsu Code all kicking in to make the show more accessible to more people. And the schedule is not updated, but there are more shows coming. I'm going to get them up this week. We've got great stuff coming up. We've got folks like Una Kravitz is coming on, and we're going to learn about Couchbase, and we're going to learn about all sorts of good things. So make sure you are checking the schedule, and you can add it to the calendar with this little button right there and get reminded whenever we go live. All right, y'all. I think that is it for today. Jess, any parting words before we call this one done?
No, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming and watching. Thanks, Jason, for having me on. Thanks, Ashley, for doing the captioning. That's all
Awesome.
I got.
All right, y'all. We're going to go find somebody to raid, and we will see you next time.